We're live on mic. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sunspot Live. I'm Scott Brooks, your host for the next hour, as I am every time we do this, and I actually love it and hope that you do too. I'm excited about our guest today. I'll get to this fine person in just a second. I want to remind you why we do this. It's to be a beast for good in our community. There are a lot of beasts floating around this society, whether it's in Waxahachie or New York City and all points in between. There are plenty of beasts out to do damage. It's time we stop and say enough's enough, and that we become a beast in our own way for good. So another word for beast is warrior. There's no greater warrior that ever lived than Jesus, and we need to be a Jesus-like warrior. So the idea is that we want to have discussions, we want to have people on, we want to inform you, we want to talk about successes, challenges, threats out there that you may not be aware of. We want to discuss it all for the sole purpose of making sure that we are a beast for good in our own neighborhoods. So that's why we do this. We also like to give things away. We don't have a giveaway today. We just gave away 6 tickets to Scarborough Fair. I hope it clears up for the weekend so that people can go. But we will have some things to share at the end of the show about not only giveaways, but some other ideas that I've been teasing you about. So that said, I want to introduce you to Grace Pandithurai. Hello, Grace.
Hello, Scott.
Let me just set this up. And Grace is someone I've known for quite a long time and have great admiration for her. I'm going to say it now, and I'll say it at the end of the show, that I have endorsed Grace as a candidate for, I never say this in the right order, but for District Court Judge in the court numbers 443.
That's
yes.
correct.
And she's in a runoff right now with her opponent. That she'll tell you all about that in just a minute. But we're going to talk a little bit about, or actually a lot about Grace and about her qualifications, her desires, her objectives, her experiences. Gracie is, those who love Grace call her Gracie. So I want her just to tell you about her, and I think you will be as impressed as I have been all along. But this is to be able to inform you about someone who's running for a position that is important to and in our county, and we should know all of our elected officials, and Gracie is working very hard to become one. So her last name, when you see it on the post, is a long last name, but it's easy to say, Pandithurai. If I can say it, you can say it.
You sure can.
Yes. So, Gracie, let's just start with you. You tell us about you, and then we'll get into the meat of the matter and go from there.
Well, it is really such an honor to do this in my hometown.
Yeah.
So in 1988, we were the first Indian family to move to Midlothian. And one of the reasons why my parents picked Ellis County to raise their kids in was they really wanted to raise us in an atmosphere that was conservative, but an atmosphere that was God-fearing. Our biblical faith is really important to my family. It's the reason why we do all the things that we do. And so my dad wanted us to, one, be enrolled in public schools. So I've been in public schools my whole life, but public schools that also were founded in faith, and a community that was founded in faith. Yep. So it's really neat to do this job in the place that helped me become the human being and the adult that I am today, right? Yeah. One of the most exciting things about the campaign has been reconnecting with old teachers. And there's a few of them that have come out in big support for me. And I think about these teachers because they were my middle school teachers.
They saw the crazy part.
Oh, they saw the crazy
Yeah.
Grace, right? Like they knew Grace before I knew who I was in Christ, before I had confidence, before I had self-esteem.
Right.
And they poured into me. And I just was reflecting a few weeks ago about how much this dream is because I had good teachers who went, no, Grace, you can do anything. You can be anything. You can be equipped to be a productive adult in our society.
Yeah,
so that's been pretty awesome.
Boy, if we all had teachers like that, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in Midlothian in my entire life. And then my junior year of high school, I'm getting ready to go back to MHS. I was a Panther. I was a proud member of the Panther Regiment, which is fun. Yeah. I will tell you that I have fallen in love with several Waxahachie Indians. There's a bunch of high school kids who are helping with our campaign, and they like to joke that this panther has fallen in love with some Waxahachie Indian band members.
Yeah.
But I was excited because I'm getting ready to go to junior year, and I buying all my Panther gear. And my dad went, "Oh, Grace, you're not going back to Midlothian." It's like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" And so he learned that Dallas had magnet school programs, and I'd been saying that I wanted to be a judge since I was 8 years old.
No kidding.
And so I finished high school at Townview Law Magnet, where I graduated valedictorian. And that school was so neat. I was so mad that I had to leave my friends. But academically, it was probably one of the best decisions they ever made for me.
Did you guys move to Dallas, or did you commute every day?
I went and stayed with my aunt and uncle.
In Dallas?
Dallas.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'd come home on the weekends and hang out with my folks. But it was like an academically rigorous course for AP classes. And then you spent several hours learning about the law, going to hear court cases, briefing them to really understand what the legal system was like.
Yeah.
And then I went to Southern Methodist and got my bachelor's degree in political science and English.
Yeah.
And then I went to Dallas Baptist University and got my master's degree in political science and Christian ministry, because those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah, right.
And then I chose to get my law degree at Regent University because I knew I was always going to do a form of public service. I knew that was the thing that God called me to. And I thought that I wanted to learn law from a faith-based perspective. And then about 92 to 96% of the students who come out of Regent go into public service and serve their community. So I knew that was the bent that I was going to be at.
Right.
In between then, so during the semester of 9/11, I had the great honor of working for Senator Chuck Grassley.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got
Of
excited.
Iowa,
Of
right?
Iowa,
Yeah.
I worked for the Senate Finance Committee the semester of 9/11. I went there to work on faith-based initiatives, which was really cool. And then 9/11 happened, and we flipped to economic stimulus package.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I was like, look at Grace. I'm going to go work in D.C. And I just completely changed this dream that I had ever since I was a kid. And sweet Senator Grassley pulled me aside and was just so honest with me. And it was like, Grace, your heart won't survive D.C.
Yeah.
because you won't be able to make the sacrifices and the compromises you have to make to get things done in D.C. And I looked at him and I went, well, I've always wanted to be a judge. I knew I wanted to go to law school. And that's really what started my trajectory towards criminal justice. And I thought, like, okay, when I go to law school, let's look at trial routes. Let's look at criminal justice.
Yeah.
And here we are, 14 years later.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And Grassley's still active,
Yes.
isn't he? Yes.
Yes.
At, I don't know how old he's pushing 90.
Man,
In his upraise, yeah.
got to be one of the hardest working men I know.
Yeah, it's God often directs us. Sometimes, I don't know if you were disappointed in all of that, but sometimes we get disappointed about the direction that we now have to go, and only then later to discover it was the biggest blessing of our life, or one of them.
Sure, it really was.
So you are chief felony prosecutor in the district attorney's office.
am.
Yeah, so I don't want to skip a whole bunch, but we only have an hour, and I want to make sure we get to the good, no, all of it's good, but to the stuff that's makes you want to do more.
Yeah.
But tell us about what it means to be a chief felony prosecutor in a district attorney's office.
Yeah, it was really such an honor to be able to do this for the community where I live and the community where I grew up, right? So a lot of my responsibilities include training staff, making sure that we're moving the dockets through as we need to. And when I say dockets, like every case has a setting, making sure settings are done, making sure we're creating the best prosecutors we can so that they can serve our community. If they want to stay here, if they want to go to a bigger office, we want people to know we have top-notch staff doing that. And then a lot of it is my own casework. So I have prosecuted every type of crime there is in the penal code system for felonies, from drugs all the way up to capital murders. But I'll tell you, Scott, my real passion has been cases where children have been hurt. I feel like this is where I've been a missionary of sorts to our community. And I've done that for about 13 years.
Yeah.
And I have helped prosecute those cases as felonies and help those kids get into the courtroom and have to face their accuser, right?
Yeah.
Because the Constitution gives us
That's
that
right.
right?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
it's an important one.
Mm-hmm.
And those kids get up in that stand and they look at all of these strangers and they talk about what happened to them.
That's amazing, isn't it? And so when you use the word children, obviously we know. Well, I shouldn't act like I know things like this, but a child in our country is under the age of 16,
18.
18. Okay, so when you use the word children, what have you found, say, I know this may be anecdotal for you, but basically the average age of the child that you most often have either represented or not represent, but that you're trying to get the person who did what they did to them?
Sure. So the average age is going to be somewhere in between 12 and 16
Okay,
because
yeah.
what we know about child abuse cases is that children so often wait to tell, right? Because they struggle with the fact that they love this person and they still see good in the person who also perpetrated this abuse, right? So
Right.
think about your own family and your son. When he breaks the rules, you're disappointed in him, but you still really love him, right?
Yep.
He's your son.
Yep.
Now imagine those emotions in a 4, 5, 6-year-old when the person who's breaking that trust is their parent
Yeah.
or their loved one or their brother or their grandfather, right? So you've got these kids who have these just mixed emotions with, I got to tell the truth, but I'm going to tell the truth, and this person that I love so much
Yeah.
is going to get hurt by it. And so a lot of times the kids wait.
Mm-hmm.
I have put a child as young as 5 years old on the stand, and I have put women as old as 78 on the stand to talk about the things that happened to them when they were little or
Yeah.
as adults. And I will tell you, it's been one of the greatest honors of my life.
bet.
And it's one of the reasons why I know I can make a good judge.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, right, when you hear those words, child abuse, what does your heart do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. And it takes experience in those cases to be able to put aside what your heart feels to make sure that everybody's constitutional rights were protected. Everybody's.
Yeah.
Defendants and victims, suspects and family members. Everyone's constitutional rights were protected. We did everything, we being law enforcement, did everything correctly so that when we stand before a jury and say, hey, in this case, this person deserves life, I know that that kid doesn't have to testify again because I made sure everybody's rights were
Yeah,
protected.
it's pretty amazing. I don't know. Well, I do know that the last thing I could probably be on the planet is a prosecutor because of the temperament that is required. When you see a bum up on the stand who's done awful things to a child, I don't know how you refrain from not wanting to go over the table
Yeah.
after him. I mean, I admire you and others who have the ability to make, as you just said, make sure everything's followed, that you're professional, that you don't, I mean, obviously you can't help but be involved because
Yeah.
you're the prosecutor, but I don't know how you don't get emotionally involved. That takes some strength. And maybe you do get
Yeah.
emotionally involved, but not to the point where it's a detriment or
Sure.
unfair or what have you.
So I'll tell you, I'm human,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Your heart gets plugged into the cases that you're working on,
Yeah.
which is why criminal experience is so important for this bench, because you have to be able to put the things in the right boxes.
Right.
I've had several people ask me, like, how do we know you can be fair and impartial when you've been a prosecutor your entire career?
Yeah.
And my answer to them has always been, it's because I've been a prosecutor my entire career, I can be fair and impartial. Prosecutors are the only attorneys who are charged by the law, actually mandated by the law, to seek justice.
Yeah.
Which means when I look at a case, it's not automatically, oh, that guy's getting a life sentence all day.
Right.
I can't do that.
Right.
If I see that somebody's constitutional rights were violated in how things were collected or things were seized, I have an ethical duty not to put that evidence forward.
Right.
So I've already been making all of those tough decisions and tough calls for the last 14 years, which is how I know I can be fair and impartial on the bench.
Good. And so I want to talk about that more in depth. Let me ask you so the judge that was there, Cindy Ermatinger, announced that she was retiring, and I can't remember how long ago that was.
In the middle of our first human trafficking trial.
Oh, nice.
Oof.
So when you heard that, given your aspirations, when you heard that, how long did it take for you to say, that's where I'm going for it?
Sure.
Did you have to think about it for days or weeks or whatever, or did you know almost immediately that you needed to go?
That's a great question. So everything I do, I bathe in prayer,
Yeah.
right? She made her announcement public. I think I learned about it the day before I had to give closing arguments in Ellis County's very first human trafficking trial.
Wow.
And I thought, God, I have to focus on this task right now, because that case was pretty severe. I knew what it meant for our county. I knew what it meant for our victim and the sheriff's office, who worked so hard to really make sure they crossed every T and dotted every I to make sure our community was safe from this guy. So I told my dad, I have to shelve this for a day, Dad, because I need to focus on the task at hand.
Yeah.
And then the minute that case was over, I started thinking about it. I started praying about it. I started planning about it. We had a family fast together for a day where we just all committed to prayer. And we talked about the pros and cons. And my dad was like, you know what, Grace? God-given dreams are bigger than yourself, and they're bigger than your own capabilities.
No doubt.
And this is something God seeded in your heart since you were a child. So let's go for it.
Yeah.
And
Good.
so it was just a few days.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's one of those things where, in corporate America, somebody that's on the ladder trying to get to the top, and they've got a great job and they're loving it, and then they hear about this, what in their mind is a real opportunity that fits maybe even better with their aspirations. It's hard to not be almost immediately distracted from it or by it. And so I thought, wow, man, that's kind of, wonder how that happened for you. So I want to be able to share with you all, for those of you that don't know, the court system has these funky numbers and these, it's kind of weird the way it's set up. To a lay person, it doesn't really make any sense when you hear about, oh, that's in District Court 443 or whatever. At least it doesn't to me. But we have how many judge positions?
Sure. So we have 3 district court positions.
Okay.
And 3 county court at law positions, and then a handful of JPs.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk to you about the district court positions,
okay.
right? So those are state courts that are here, and they hear all of our big felonies, right? And so they can hear our big felonies, our big civil cases, family divorces, those kinds of things. So all 3 courts are what are called courts of general jurisdiction, created by statute, meaning they can hear all of these things. And together, our judges have decided our courts are going to specialize. And then they filed those local rules with the Office of Court Administration. So the state said, yes, I like it. Go. You guys do what you're going to do. So the 378th, which is our Judge Doug Wallace, hears all of our family law cases currently and juvenile cases, and he's been doing a great job. He's also going to oversee the Veterans Court program that the DA's office created and started working with him, which is going to be really cool.
Good.
The 40th District Court is held by Judge Bob Carroll, and he hears all of our civil cases. He also serves as our administrative judge. So when there's a problem, everybody goes into him and he'll tell us how to fix it.
Right.
And the 443rd currently hears every single felony case that is filed in Ellis County.
Wow. So nothing but felony cases.
Currently,
for
yes.
the position, I call it judgeship. Is that a word?
Sure,
is that right?
it can be a word.
So, we'll say it's a word. So what you seek is to be a judge that oversees all kinds of felonies, but only felonies. Is that a fair way of saying it?
So that's what's happening in that court right now, right? And so I anticipate that it is always going to be a courtroom that hears the majority of the felony cases that are filed in Ellis County, just by the way that the courts are scheduled and separated.
Okay, so just by example, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but the police chief of, was it May Pearl?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm right so far,
Yes.
right? Who had done awful things to a young lady. That was it tried in 443?
It was tried in the 443rd
Okay.
District Court, and I was the
I
prosecutor
was
that
going to ask you
handled that
that.
case.
Yeah,
So that case is a case that I will never forget
Yeah.
because I hold us as law enforcement to a higher standard.
yeah,
And he broke that trust
That's
with
awful.
the community
yeah.
with not just one girl, right?
Multiple.
We learned
More.
about other young ladies. The one that came forward, it happened to her when she was a child,
Mm-hmm.
and she came forward as an adult because she just carried so much guilt.
Yeah.
She thought, if I would have said something as a child, maybe these other kids would not have been
Yeah.
affected.
Yeah.
I got to prosecute that case with Mr. Rick Sipes, and I'll tell you, it was a complete team effort with the rangers
Mm-hmm.
and the investigators in our office did such a good job to
Right.
pull that case together
Right.
and make sure those girls get justice. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been a prosecutor in the 443rd District Court for the last 10 years.
Wow. So you were a prosecutor in the same courtroom that you're looking now to lead.
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
So let's talk about you get into the race. There are three of you.
Yes.
So we have our general election back in, what was it, general? Is it, or is it, yeah.
It was a primary.
Primary, that's what, yeah. And so one of you was eliminated, and the
Yes.
other two of you didn't get 50%. So in all of those instances, then there has to be a runoff. That runoff then is just another, I don't know how many months, 2 months, 60 days
Yeah, it
roughly,
feels like
campaign.
it. Yes.
It continues, So not only is the energy required, there's money that's required, there's a lot of work that's required, because now it's really going to be intense, which is why I think, is it fair to say that that's been the case in this?
Yes, definitely.
So you're running against Greg Wilhelm. I want to ask you, before we get to you,
Sure.
specifically, what, just generally speaking, what are the attributes of any judge, similar to what we're talking about here? What are the attributes that person must have to be a really good, effective judge?
Sure. So for me, one, the type of experience you have is important for the type of cases that you're going to hear, right?
Yeah.
So a judge essentially is kind of an umpire that's going to call balls and strikes. He's going to tell you when it's fair, when it's not. And I think it's really important to have played in the game
Yeah.
to be able to call those things,
Yeah.
right? The type of cases is important. And I believe every judge has to be a strict constitutionalist, especially when you're talking about criminal cases, because that Constitution, it's sacred.
Yeah.
The intent of it is important. It's how we agreed to live in a community together.
That's right.
So when you're thinking about a case where you may sentence someone to life in prison or even death, right? Being a strict constitutionalist is important, because that also means you're not getting into malicious prosecution. You're
Right.
not filing frivolous cases. And everyone knows when they step into that courtroom, they're all being judged by the same law.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So a judge should never make law from the bench. That's not what a trial judge does. A trial judge just calls it as they see it,
Yeah.
make sure everything fair is impartial, and follows the rule of law. And I don't think you can do that if you haven't practiced the type of law that is
Yeah.
in that courtroom.
Do we have anything you need to read or tell us, Jackson? Okay, yeah. So just so you know, the weather today has played havoc on our monitor here that I normally look at. So Jackson is following you all who are writing in and reaching out. So go for it, Jackson. Okay.
My daughter is a middle school teacher, and it means so much to teachers to hear those type of positive comments. She and so many do to make positive impact on children and their future. Thank you for sharing your stories and passion, Grace. My daughter, Rena, was not one of your teachers, though she has seen you in action on some cases. You left quite an impact on her. She has been so impressed with your knowledge, experience, and professionalism.
Very nice. I
Oh,
don't know if you
thank
heard
you.
that very well. A very nice compliment from a viewer that has observed Grace's impact on a young lady, child, I guess, daughter, and that was very nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of times that to be a good judge, you have to have the right experience. There are times when I have watched judges on TV and have actually just researched them myself, and I have found that most of them, and maybe they have to, I don't know, but most of them came from, or many of them at least, came from the prosecutorial side
Yeah.
of a courtroom. As it relates to qualifications, I can't just run for, or can I?
You have to be an attorney.
Okay, so you have to be an attorney, and do you have to be? Does it matter what kind of an attorney?
Nope.
What else would I have to have or be?
Sure. So you need to be an attorney to run for judge, right?
Okay.
Which is why I think you get such a wide variety of people who
Mm-hmm.
run. But I will tell you, as I've been learning, because one of the things people have asked or what other people have said is, well, Grace can't be a judge because she's been too good of a prosecutor. She'd have to be recused from so many cases. And that's just wholly not true,
Yeah.
Scott. You know, when we look at our neighboring counties like Van Zandt and Henderson and even Kaufman County, each one of those counties have elected district attorneys or felony chiefs to be a district judge
yeah.
in where they are hearing felony cases.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really important because when you have a really great prosecutor, they're going to make a really great judge for your community because they're already thinking through how to make hard decisions and how to make fair ones.
Got it. So is it, again, most of those, and I could, just anecdotal information, my experience is that many judges do come from the prosecutorial side that doesn't, not to the exclusion of having been a defense attorney or
Right.
whatever, but is there, I know there's a difference between a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I'm going to just say this and you tell me if I'm off base.
Sure.
Is it defense attorneys seem to have a little more, let's say, leeway. Not that they're given leeway, but they certainly test leeway and can be rather creative in their approach to defending their client. If that's true, is it your opinion that a judge is going to be a better judge because they have been a prosecutor before versus a defense attorney, or would that be an unfair statement?
I think that's an unfair statement, right? Because a defense attorney has a job in the courtroom, and their job is to make sure constitutional rights are protected,
Right.
and their job is to advocate zealously for their client.
Mm-hmm.
I want to point back to a comment I made earlier. Prosecutors are the only attorneys who are mandated by law to seek justice, which means I can't win a case at all cost. I'm not supposed to zealously fight for something that I want to happen, right?
Yeah.
I have to do what's right,
Yeah.
period. A defense attorney is supposed to challenge that and
Right.
make sure that I am following the law and make sure that constitutional rights are protected, right? And so they have a role, and they have an important role.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying what I was trying to say. So thank you for that. So you've got 13 years as a prosecutor.
Yeah, 14 now.
14
I can't
now.
believe it.
Yeah. So the other two judges that there are 5 total, correct?
There are 3 county courts and 3 districts. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's talk about you, and specifically, we heard you say what you think makes for a really good. Good is a relative term, so I like to use the word effective, competent,
Sure.
proper kind of judge. What makes you, for the voters that are watching? And I know there are going to be plenty that watch this because it's getting down to the last few days,
is.
right? May 28th.
May 20th
May
starts
20th.
early voting, guys.
Wednesday,
so
and-
go out.
Yeah, so May 20th, what's today? That's Monday.
Monday.
And then, so it's It's
So
like the whole week next
the
week.
whole week next week.
And then a couple days.
May 28th is election day.
Okay. So just tell us about why the folks watching should be sold on Gracie or Judge Pandithurai and anything else you want. I want to be able to make sure that you all don't just listen to two folks talk, but that you get substantive things before you. And if I feel like I need to challenge them, certainly you know by now that I will. I doubt that I will have to here. But tell us what makes you the better candidate for this position.
Sure. So as a judge, I know that I can be a constitutional conservative, and those aren't just words for me. If you look at my entire career, that is what I've spent my career doing, making sure that our constitutional rights are protected, preserved, and placed in front of a courtroom in a way that is fair. I also have the experience you guys can count on to continue to keep our community safe. It's not just words. You can actually look at my record and see that I have. I know that I can be fair and impartial because I've already played this game. And sure, I'm playing as a pitcher today, as a prosecutor, if you're thinking about the game of baseball, and that the role of an umpire is going to be completely different. But because I've actually played this game, I know what the rules are, I know what the laws are, I know how our courtroom works and the struggles that we have with our docketing management system, I can easily step into that new role as an umpire and be ready on day one, which is what our community needs. Our community needs a judge that they know will be fair and impartial, that understands the trauma that a family goes through when they step into that courtroom, right? Because this isn't just about pushing papers aside. A courtroom, especially this courtroom, is families in the middle of trauma on both sides, from a victim to a defendant's family members, to everyone who had to watch a crime happen, to the children who have to get up on the stand to testify. It's trauma. And trauma is stressful. And so you need someone with experience who can step in on day one and help move the ball closer to the goal line so that that resolution can come quickly. Because for those families, that trauma doesn't end and may not even end after the court resolution has come.
I wouldn't think it
right?
would. Probably takes years and years, right?
It takes a long time.
Yeah.
So because I've been doing it, and because I've been doing it in this courtroom for the last 10 years, I have the experience that you can count on to be efficient, to also spend our tax dollars wisely, and to make sure that we're using this courtroom to protect our community and protect our constitutional rights.
Okay, very good. So let me ask you this. A minute ago I asked you about qualifications, just basic qualifications,
Sure.
like Scott Brooks couldn't run for a judge. Although I would enjoy being a judge for a day. as long as I could say, bring that person in here, I need to address them. So you said they had to be an attorney. What now? That there are lots of different attorneys in this
There
world.
sure are.
So it could be, is it any type of attorney that's qualified? I'm not qualified, but
anyone who's qualified, right?
that is as being an attorney already.
Yeah, which is why lots of different types of
Yeah.
attorneys apply for lots of different benches.
Got it. So let's just get to one of the ploys or one of the tactics that has been thrown against you, and that is this recusal issue.
Sure.
So if I'm going to use this analogy, you just said baseball, and it made me stop to think about, well, if I'm a pitcher for, say, 14 years for a major league team,
Mm-hmm.
and then I get done playing, and I'm still relatively young, and I still have a passion for the game, and blah, 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 and I want to become an umpire, is the analogy that somebody in that setting would say, well, because you were a pitcher, you really can't become an umpire because your whatever would be jaded or whatever, so you'd have to recuse yourself from being the home plate umpire because you were once a pitcher. Is that similar to what we're talking about here? because I want to understand the recusal issue. Because if it's automatic in a mindset that a prosecutor would, again, automatically have to recuse themselves from cases in the future, then how would a prosecutor ever become a judge?
Right?
Yeah. So help me understand what the whole recusal matter is based upon.
Sure. So anytime you elect someone with experience, right, in order for there to be a fair and impartial courtroom, they have to step away from the cases they personally touched, right?
Right.
So anybody you elect would have to step away from a case that they worked on or a person that they worked on, right?
Yeah.
So the false narrative that has been put
Placed on
out
you, yeah.
has been that I would have to be recused from thousands and thousands and thousands of cases because I worked at the DA's office for so long. And then that would effectively cost the taxpayers more money. And that is just wholly untrue. Because when you think about it, this last year, our office filed over 2,000 cases in the 443rd District Court.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't work on every single 2,000 of those cases,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then conversely, our office, I'm so proud of the felony staff, resolved over 1,800 cases. So we almost balanced the checkbook for the year, which means there was a lot of good work happening in that courtroom. And to think that I did every single one of those cases is just
I bet.
laughable, right?
Right.
So someone put in a public information request to actually find out the number of cases. And right now, there were 155 cases that had my name on it that I was personally assigned to. That's not thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. And it's a function that happens when you hire someone with experience. And why wouldn't you hire someone with experience, right?
Yeah, so, again, I don't want to interrupt you, but
Sure.
is the premise that, now I could understand that if you as a judge, just consider those 155 cases, if for some reason there's an element of those cases that have to come back to court, that you would be in a position of recusing yourself,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
But those 155 cases, I assume are resolved. Most of them.
Some of them are resolved. Some of them are still active. I think
Okay.
those might be mostly active. But I'll
Okay.
tell you what has happened in the past, and I can't imagine it wouldn't happen. Whether I'm elected or Greg is elected,
Yeah.
I don't see this tradition changing because people who run to serve Ellis County
Yeah.
are servants. And that includes our judges. And
Yeah.
I know who they are. I know who these men are. I know that they got into this job to serve our community. And what has happened in the past is when a judge had to recuse themselves because of the experience on the bench, the judges just swapped cases.
Yeah.
So it wasn't spending thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. I go back to the analogy of an umpire. That, in a sense, that's what a judge is. And so if as an umpire, and you guys can tell me if this makes any sense to you, but if I'm a former baseball player, I'm now umpiring in the same league in which I played, and one of the teams or the team for which I played, or a buddy of mine on the team that was traded and now plays for another team, the major league, the organization isn't going to assign me to that game. I mean, they have enough sense to say, wait a minute, Scott has an attachment to John Doe, who's a pitcher, and I wouldn't want to be in that game either, nor would I would expect the Major League Baseball would say we're not going to put you in that. That's what you're saying. You guys, I don't know, this is kind of a raw way of saying it, but you guys get together and say, this case should not be in 443.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And then you just switch them out. The other thing I'm really thinking about when I think about the game analogy is, if you're playing baseball, you want an umpire who has played baseball before.
Yeah.
You don't want someone who only played basketball or only played football, right? Because they don't know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
They've never been in it. They don't know the procedures for the game.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there's a whole lot of analogies we could throw at that. The experience is a positive as I see
Sure.
it, just as a layperson. I mean, I don't, I'm supporting you and I'm endorsing you. Yet I consider myself to be a fair person. Whether it's you or your opponent or or the other opponent that you had back, we want experience.
Yeah.
And if I'm hiring people for my own company, I want experience just like you do in your daily lives. So do you, as a result of talking about this and what you've I know
Sure.
I've seen you at various forums, and you almost always address this issue, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So do you think of it as just a political ploy that's being thrown out there, or do you think the people that are saying that actually believe it to be true?
I think the people who say it actually believe it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I correct them, they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. What you're saying, Grace, makes sense. Right?
Well, so when you first corrected it,
Mm-hmm.
because again, you talk about it a lot because you
Yes.
feel compelled to, and I understand that. But if and I'm not trying to draw out from you anything that you don't feel, but from again
Sure.
somebody that's deeply involved in politics and posturing and strategies and watching campaigns, is if you set that record straight the first time, and then it continued to be thrown at you or thrown to the potential voter, then the either somebody's in denial at hearing your explanation, they totally disagree with it, which
Which
be
is okay.
Okay, and that may be the case here because
Sure.
it continues to be out there. So that must be the case, that they believe that whether it's 155 or 2,000, that you would have to constantly be recusing yourself. It just seems. I use the word yucky to me. It just seems like that. Let's find a better. If there's something you have that wants to differentiate,
Mm-hmm.
not you, but your opponent, differentiate, then choose something that's a bit more legitimate. It just doesn't hold water.
I think it just confuses the issue, right?
Yeah.
Because when you look at every state in the United States, and then you just drill it down to Texas, and then even drill it down closer to counties that are similar to ours, in every one of those counties, you are going to find district judges who used to be prosecutors.
Yeah.
And why is that so? And I liken to this. If you were going to elect your surgeon to do heart surgery on you tomorrow, Scott, would you elect someone who's actually done a heart surgery? Or are you going to elect like your podiatrist?
Yeah. Well, that's obvious. That's another great analogy. That's my point. I just want to, for those that are watching, and as we get closer to Election Day, I want it to be fair and equitable and not cheesy and politically slimy and all that stuff. What you just said is true, not just of surrounding counties and our county, but in all the places I've been. And I've seen many a judge race that, and many of them come. I mean, you don't. Maybe it's happened here and I don't know about it. But when a judge position comes open, which it doesn't happen a lot.
No.
Doug took over. Was that a created because of our growth that his court? Who was in that?
Joe Grubbs was in
Okay,
his
yeah.
courtroom
So-
beforehand, but
yeah.
Judge Ermitinger's bench was created,
Okay.
and then she kept getting
Yeah.
reelected.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I have seen over the years and in various places is that most of the time when a judge position comes open and candidates throw their hat in the ring, they are usually local people. And, Doug was local. Doug Wallace
Yeah.
was local, right? So, and I don't know of many others examples here, but I'm guessing just common sense, excuse me, says that it would seem a little odd to me that if a position came open in Ellis County
Sure.
for the Judge 443, that somebody from Michigan would find out about it, throw their hat in the ring, and want to move down here to be the judge. It just seems not natural to me. The third
Yeah.
person that was in this race was local as well,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah. What kind of attorney was he?
Oh, he's great. He's
Yeah.
currently our associate judge,
Okay.
Mr. Ken Lumberg.
Yes.
Worked really hard, like me, grew up in Midlothian. So it was
Yeah.
really interesting that all three candidates from this race
Yeah.
are Midlothian
Yeah, that is interesting.
natives. Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you about our country.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on that. Let me see how much time we have. So we got 15 minutes. I want to get your take on the country. So we're seeing Trump right now go through what I can only imagine is a form of hell, a form that keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that in that, I don't know if that's called a district court up there in New York City or what it's called, but it's the same kind of deal. I mean, I don't know if you would have cases like that ever here, but what enables judges and attorneys to just say, excuse my expression, but to hell with the rules, we're just going to do what we want to do? How does that happen?
It's one of the reasons why, Scott, I talk about how I'm a constitutional conservative. And for me, a judge has a very particular role when you read the Constitution, right? Everything should be separate. A judge isn't about making power or showing power. A judge isn't about writing laws.
Yeah.
Judge's job is solely to enforce the rule of law and make sure the Constitution is protected. Let's drill it down further into a trial judge, right? A trial judge doesn't get to decide what cases go before their court. They have to hear whatever is legally and properly filed.
Right.
And then they need to make their rulings and decisions based off the law.
Correct.
And I've always said, once your personal opinions start growing so much that you can't follow the rule of law, then it's time for you not to be in those roles.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. All right. Because I always say to myself, isn't there just one person in that courtroom that has some authority? Isn't there one person in D.C. that can say, time out, this is wrong? Mitt Romney, of all the politicians out there that not of all of them, I'm not a big fan of Mitt Romney, but yesterday he came out and said that he thought that Biden, in that example of what's going on in New York City, made a huge mistake by not pardoning Trump, which was, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but what he meant was Biden should be the one to say, wait a minute, what's happening in that courtroom is wrong. It's not constitutional. It's not fair. It's not ethical. And we got to stop that. I just wish there was somebody in every place that would say enough's enough. You're trying, not that we have any problems like that here. You're just simply trying to follow someone. Well, you're not trying to follow someone, but you'll be following someone who I think highly of, Cindy, and I would imagine you do as well, and continue to do it the right way.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
So before we go here, so you told us about you.
Yes.
Let's spend just a few minutes more talking about the distinctions between you and your opponent. So I don't want to goad you into anything negative because I don't really know much to goad you into, but I do want to ask you what you told us what about you, but what is the distinction that people should understand?
So I know that several people will be like, Grace, you can't keep saying these things, but I will tell you that I really like Greg. We are friends outside of this. When people try to ask us, rate each other conservatively, and we're like, we're both conservatives. We both love Jesus. Yeah. The difference in us is our experience and types of experience, right? So he used to be the judge of the County Court at Law 1, and then Jim Chapman beat him in an election.
When was that? Do you remember? It had to be.
It was before I came back home.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
And most of his experience is civil, right? I'm the only candidate running who has ever tried a felony criminal case before a jury. And when we're talking about electing our next trial judge who's going to sit and preside over those criminal felony jury trials, I think that experience is pretty paramount. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, experience is, it makes all the difference in the world. And, you know, there are those people who, you've heard this before probably, but if you've got 14 years of experience, you're either someone who's got 14 years of aggregate experience from which you can learn a vast number of things to be what it is you want to be going forward, or you can be someone, and there are plenty of these people in life who have had 1 year of experience 14 times, which means that their experience has never expanded. It was the same thing, just time and time again. Those people aren't any better than they were in year 2 So it seems to me, I know it, that you've been able to capture 14 years and say that body of work is what you believe will enable you to be the best judge.
It does. And part of that body of work also includes the time where I did civil cases as a prosecutor,
Yeah.
right? Representing children who were abused in the civil side, not the criminal side. And in that body of work, I also did jury trials, and I also presented evidence before a judge. And so my experience is not just criminal before a jury, it's also civil.
Yeah.
Though the majority of it is very much criminal, and it's work that I'm quite proud of.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's what I had from me. I want to allow you to speak to our viewers, voters.
Sure.
Hopefully you're registered to vote. And if you're not, I'm going to send our two security men here who, if either one of them came up to you and said, you better do something, you'd just laugh right at them. One of them's my son, and the other one's worked for us for a while, and I love him. But they aren't the hulking type. More comments, questions? All right, let's capture
Sure.
these first. This is from Garrett. Grace, can you describe your relationship with the defense bar, and do you believe that will help or hinder your ability to run an efficient docket? Have you done anything in your current job to create a more efficient docket?
Sure. So I believe I have a really good relationship with our defense bar. Now, mind you, our work is adversarial. So when we're in the courtroom, we fight, and we fight for our cases.
Yeah.
But we put out a list of endorsements this past week, I think either last night or this morning. And when you look through it, you'll see defense attorneys on there, including one of the ones that I fight with the most, right? And I asked him, Mr. Crawford, why are you supporting me? And he said, I'm supporting you because experience is important.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the experience that's necessary for this courtroom.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I think he asked about dockets.
Yeah. Relationship with the defense bar. Do you believe that will help or hinder your ability to run an efficient docket? And have you done anything in your current job to create a more efficient docket?
Sure. So I really believe my relationship with the defense bar will help to run a more efficient docket. One of the things that we've been working on is trying to get plea settings for people who are in the jail a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, when the state and the defense reach a plea deal, sometimes it takes up to 4 weeks to get a plea setting, simply because of the number of cases that are in one courtroom,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you've got over 2,000 cases, almost 4,000 cases in one courtroom, and just 8 hours a day to solve some of those things. And so one of the things that I've been doing diligently every day for the last few months is going through our jail list and seeing who has newly been arrested, whose cases can we move, finding folks who have been arrested because they didn't show up to court, and
Right.
emailing those defense attorneys saying, hey, your guy's now in the jail. Let's get, because they won't know either unless somebody tells them. And so we have that relationship in that, hey, it's going to be adversarial when it needs to be, but we all are trying to move that ball to resolution, right? And so I think working on the jail list is one of the things that I've done to try and help move our dockets a little bit more efficiently.
Okay, good. Kelly says, actually, there are two Kellys asking two different questions. Kelly B says, True Texas Project, a far-right PAC, had endorsed you. Do you support their policies and principles?
Sure. So I am a conservative, and I'm a conservative at heart. There are a lot of things about the True Texas Project, like their pro-life movements, that I support. But as a judicial candidate, I'm not really allowed to talk about my personal beliefs in one organization or another.
Okay, I can. True Texas Project, which what they stand for, follows my mantra for life. I just think if you're watching, True Texas Project's got to cut back on the drama and the silliness and the embarrassing tactics. It's absurd to watch some of that, and it cheapens, unfortunately, in my view, it can cheapen an endorsement, and we don't want that. It needs to be a credible, powerful endorsement, not one that's those people who walk around the courthouse and act crazy and trying to do this and trying to do that. So I'm just asking, please do it well, not in such dramatic fashion. The other Kelly, this is Kelly H., says, Grace, can you explain to the voters why you are the candidate that will save money for taxpayers? Who is more fiscally responsible?
Sure. So I think when we look at the history of what we've done, I know that I can be fiscally responsible because of my experience, right? I know that Judge Chapman has put out budgets in the past where he talks about the amounts of money that he saved. I know that with what I know how to do in that courtroom, I can help save taxpayer money. One of the things that I want to do is shorten the number of days between indictment to resolution. With the number of days being shortened, we're going to save money in that courtroom. I think that every time an attorney has to step into that courtroom, it should mean something, right? Like it should have a purpose. And that purpose should be moving the case to resolution. So if we cut out the number of times we're just going to sign a piece of paper, then we're going to save taxpayer money, because then we're not paying for the bailiff, and we're not paying for the court reporter, and we're not paying for the prosecutor's salary or even the court-appointed attorney's salary, right? And so I think there are some areas in the types of cases that we're working with where we can shorten the number of days to officially move a docket, which will save us taxpayer money.
Okay, good. Any other comments or questions that I haven't covered? All right. So to close up, before I get to my final remarks, is there anything else you want to say to the folks watching?
Yes.
Okay.
I would encourage you to research your candidates, right? You guys are all smart, intelligent voters, because I know when you do, you will see that I am the right candidate for this bench. I have the experience you can count on. I have the service that you can count on. And I know that I can help protect our community and protect the Constitution. I am the only candidate running who has ever sent child abusers and murderers to prison. I'm the only person who has ever tried a felony case. I have heard the stories. I have seen the bruises. I know what it takes to manage trauma in the courtroom and manage it fairly and impartially and effectively, to have strong sentences and to protect our community. I will tell you, in studying about runoffs, I learned that maybe 10% of the people who voted in the municipal election show up to vote in the runoff. Do you know what that number is then for us, Scott?
It's pretty low, right?
800 people. 800 people. And so I would just encourage all of you to make time over the next week to go and vote. Vote informed. Don't just cast your vote for who you think looks the best, because that would be me, right?
Well, sure.
Or vote informed, because when you do, you will cast your vote for Grace for Judge.
Very good. Thank you very much for being here. And God bless you. Good luck to you. And we'll be sure to report what happens come March 20, what day? 8?
May 28th.
May 28th. Oh, I said March, didn't I?
did
Yeah, I'm
say
sorry. No.
May 28th.
So let me just reiterate. May 20th through, I think it includes that Saturday.
So,
does it?
No,
it doesn't. Okay.
So early voting is May 20th through the 24th.
Okay.
It's 7 to 7 at the Women's Building here in Waxahachie, but everywhere else, I believe it's 8 to 5. It may be 8 to 4 in some places, except for Thursday and Friday. Thursday and Friday, it will be 7 to 7. And then if you miss it next week, because I know some people are going to be on a cruise, you come right off your cruise ship, and then you can vote on Tuesday, May 28th from 7 to 7.
There you go. So if you know, what's interesting, I don't know if I've said this before, but I get a lot of calls from readers and even non-readers who want to get more information about candidates, and the case holds true here too. So I'm always willing to stop what I'm doing and have a discussion with fellow citizens to make sure that I can at least share with you what I have learned. And when people say, well, who should I vote for? I'd never say this is who you should vote for, but I will be happy to show you my, I copy out a general ballot, and I mark it up how I am either going to vote or have voted, and I'm happy to share that with you. But I don't want to ever tell anybody how they should vote. I'll tell you how I vote. But my vote, you can rest assured, is always based on a significant amount of research and or experience with the candidate. So in this case, I again have worked with, sit on boards with, and have watched Grace in action, which is why I totally support her. I didn't have prepared to say this, but to Mr. Wilhelm, by law, and to you all, by law, the media is required to give the same amount of time to all candidates, assuming those candidates want that time. So and we will always abide by that, always have. So if Mr. Wilhelm is watching, or somebody gets the word to him, I'm happy to provide him the same amount of time, which has been about an hour. But that's up to Mr. Wilhelm. I'm not going to go track any candidate down. Most candidates will come and say, hey, can we sit down and talk about this on your show or in your paper, or what have you. So that's the way it works. So in closing, I want to remind you why we're here. We want to be a beast for good in our community. Waxahachie is an extraordinary, beautiful place. We want to keep it that way. The Sun, personally, myself, I have worked hard to build what I call a moat around Waxahachie so that we can keep things like what we see in New York City happening out of here. We can keep child trafficking, and we can keep protests that tear things down and burn things up out of here. We just want to keep Waxahachie what it is. Today is March the 16th. Why am I stuck on March?
I know.
May the 16th. We, as I've shared with you, we are going to be expanding our format. We have a number of people that have been watching from day one. That continues to grow exponentially across all these different platforms. And so we want to stay with that growth, even though it's pretty early in our growth process. We want to make sure that we are staying up with the times, as it were. So we're gonna have the same kind of discussions. We're gonna make it a bit bigger. We've got a new brand that we're going to come out with. All of that will be shared in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to launch this in mid-June, and I'm excited about that, and believe you will be as well. We're going to be continuing to give giveaways. We're going to continue to have guests. There will be this kind of element going forward where me and a candidate sit down, or me and a community leader, or me and somebody that's doing something special out in the world. We'll sit down and have a one-on-one discussion, because most people have said they enjoy that. So we will continue to do that. So we're going to take a break between now and the date in June. The date we'll be sharing soon with you. So we will not have Sunspot Live the next 2 or 3 weeks, but we'll be back before you know it with a whole new brand and same kind of discussions. But I think you'll discover it to be a lot more fun and exciting. I know I will. So again, be a beast for good. Seems like there's something else I want to tell you all, but I don't think so. Again, thank you, Grace, for being here.
My pleasure.
If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at scott@waxahachiesun.com, scott@waxahachiesun.com. Our phone number is 972-316-7707, 972-316-7707. This is about making you a more informed voter who, when you go to the ballot box, you just don't check something, or you just have to wonder, you won't have to wonder about who it is on the ballot. So we're very happy to do this. So thank you. Have a great rest of the rainy Thursday and a great weekend. We will be seeing you soon. So long.
bensound.com. bensound.com. bensound.com.